The phone rang at the worst possible moment. Dante Marchetti sat at the head of a long table, surrounded by men who did not trust easily and never smiled without a reason. Papers were spread across the table. Numbers, routes, names of people who owed him favors and people who owed him money. It was the kind of meeting where one wrong word could start a war that lasted years. His phone buzzed once in his pocket. He ignored it. It buzzed again. He glanced at the screen under the table, ready to silence it completely until he saw the name. Margaret, his housekeeper. The woman who had worked in his home for 11 years. The woman who never called him during business hours, not once, not even the day the pipes burst in the kitchen. He answered it under the table, keeping his voice low. "Margaret, I'm in a meeting. What is it?" Her voice came through broken, shaking, barely holding together. "Mr. Marchetti, please come home now. It's Lily. She will destroy her." The words hit him like a fist to the chest. "Who will destroy her?" "Margaret, slow down. What's happening?" But the line was already filled with distant sounds. A door slamming. A small voice crying somewhere far off in the house. And Vivienne's voice, sharp and cold, cutting through everything else. Dante stood up so fast his chair fell backward and hit the floor with a loud crack. Every man at the table turned to look at him. These were men who had seen him negotiate without blinking, men who had watched him stay calm while entire fortunes were threatened. They had never seen him look the way he looked now. "We're done here," he said. His voice did not shake, but something underneath it had changed completely. "Continue without me." One of his men, Edmund, a tall man with gray at his temples who had been by Dante's side for over 15 years, stood up quickly. "Dante, what's wrong?" "It's Lily," Dante said, already moving toward the door. "Something is wrong at home." Edmund did not ask another question. He simply nodded and followed him out, already reaching for his own phone to call the driver. The elevator ride down felt like it lasted an hour. Dante stared at his own reflection in the metal doors, seeing a man he barely recognized. Not the boss, not the man other men feared. Just a father, terrified, replaying his housekeeper's words over and over in his mind. "She will destroy her." What did that mean? Who was doing this? And why had nobody told him sooner? The car ripped through the city streets, weaving between traffic, running two lights that should have stopped them. Dante gripped the door handle so tightly his knuckles turned white. Edmund sat beside him, quiet, watching him with concern but knowing better than to speak. Sometimes silence was the only thing that could be offered. As the car sped forward, Dante's mind pulled him backward, to a hospital room 6 years earlier. His wife, Grace, pale and exhausted, holding a tiny bundle wrapped in a soft blue blanket. She had looked up at him with tired eyes full of love, and said the words he had never forgotten. "Promise me you'll protect her. No matter what happens to me, promise me she'll always be safe." He had promised. He had meant it with everything in him. 6 months later, Grace was gone, taken suddenly by an illness that no one had seen coming. And Dante had raised Lily alone, surrounded by wealth and power and danger, trying every single day to give her something normal in a world that was anything but normal. He had built walls around his business to keep it away from her. He had hired the best people to protect her. He had done everything he could think of to keep the promise he made in that hospital room. And now, somehow, something was happening inside his own home that he had not seen coming. The car finally turned onto the long driveway that led to his estate. Dante was out of the door before it had fully stopped, running across the gravel path toward the front entrance. The house stood tall and quiet in the afternoon light, looking peaceful from the outside, giving no sign of the storm happening within its walls. He pushed through the front doors, and the peaceful illusion shattered immediately. He could hear it now clearly, without the phone between them. A voice raised in anger, sharp words being thrown like knives, followed by the unmistakable sound of a small child crying, the kind of crying that came from real fear, not just tears over a broken toy or a scraped knee. Dante's whole body went cold. He moved through the entrance hall, past the grand staircase, toward the sound. Margaret appeared from the kitchen doorway, her apron still on, her hands trembling. "Mr. Marchetti," she said, rushing toward him. "Thank goodness. I didn't know what else to do. I tried to stop it, I really did, but she told me to stay out of it, said it wasn't my place." "Where is she?" Dante asked, his voice tight and low. "Where is Lily?" "Upstairs in her room. The door is locked from the outside." Dante felt something inside him snap into place, cold and sharp and focused. He took the stairs two at a time, Margaret hurrying behind him, trying to keep up despite her age. At the top of the stairs he saw her, Vivienne, standing outside Lily's bedroom door with her arms crossed, her expression a strange mix of frustration and something colder underneath it. She looked up as he approached, and for just a moment, something flickered across her face, something that looked almost like she had been caught doing something she should not have been doing. "Dante," she said, quickly rearranging her expression into something softer. "You're home early." "Open this door," he said. "She's just having a tantrum. Children do that. You spoil her too much, that's the problem. She needs to learn that she can't always." "Open the door, Vivienne." Something in his tone made her stop talking. She reached into her pocket, pulled out a key, and unlocked the door without another word. Dante pushed past her and stepped inside. The room was dim, the curtains pulled shut. In the corner, curled up small against the wall, was Lily. Her knees were pulled up to her chest, her arms wrapped around them, her small body shaking with quiet sobs. When she heard the door open, she flinched, pressing herself even further into the corner, as if trying to disappear into the wall itself. It was that flinch that broke something inside Dante Marchetti, more than anything else could have. His little girl was afraid enough that even the sound of a door opening made her shrink away in fear. "Lily," he said softly, crouching down slowly so he would not startle her further. "Lily, sweetheart, it's Daddy." For a moment she did not move. Then slowly she lifted her head, her eyes red and swollen from crying, and when she saw it was really him, she scrambled across the floor and threw herself into his arms. Dante held her tightly, feeling her small body still trembling against him. He looked over her shoulder at Vivienne, who stood in the doorway, her arms still crossed, watching the scene with an expression that gave nothing away. "We need to talk," Dante said, his voice dangerously quiet. "Now." "Not in front of her," Vivienne said. "Margaret," Dante called out, "can you take Lily downstairs and get her something warm to drink? I'll be down soon." Margaret nodded and gently held her arms out. Lily hesitated, looking up at her father with wide, uncertain eyes, as if she was afraid to let go of him. "It's okay," Dante whispered to her. "I'm not going anywhere, I promise." Reluctantly, Lily allowed Margaret to lead her out of the room and down the hallway. Dante watched them go until they disappeared around the corner, and only then did he turn back to face Vivienne, closing the bedroom door behind them so they could speak alone. "Explain to me," he said slowly, "exactly what just happened here." Vivienne sighed, the kind of sigh that suggested she was the one being unfairly treated. "She wouldn't listen to me. I told her to clean up her toys and she ignored me completely, so I raised my voice, and she started crying and I put her in her room to calm down. That's it. That's all that happened." "Margaret said you locked the door from the outside." "Because she kept trying to run out and scream at me. I needed her to calm down." Dante studied her face carefully, searching for any hint of honesty in her expression. Something about her story did not sit right with him. Margaret's phone call had been filled with real terror, not the kind of concern someone would have over a simple disagreement about toys. "This isn't the first time, is it?" Dante said. It was not a question. Vivienne's expression flickered again, just for a second, before she caught herself and smoothed it back into calm frustration. I don't know what you mean. Margaret said you told her to stay out of it. That means this has happened before. Tell me the truth, Vivienne. For a long moment she said nothing. The silence between them stretched out, heavy and uncomfortable, filled with everything neither of them was saying out loud. She's not my daughter, Vivienne finally said, her voice sharper now, the softness completely gone. I never asked to raise someone else's child. You expect me to just step into this role and love her the way you do, but it's not that simple, Dante. It was never that simple. Dante felt his jaw tighten. So instead of telling me that, instead of talking to me about how you were feeling, you decided to take it out on a 6-year-old child who has already lost her mother. That's not what I want you to pack a bag, Dante said, cutting her off. Tonight. Vivienne's eyes widened. You're overreacting. This is exactly the kind of thing you do. You make everything into some huge, dramatic event. My daughter was curled up on the floor of her own room, shaking with fear because of something you did, Dante said, his voice low and controlled, which somehow made it more frightening than if he had shouted. There is nothing to discuss. Pack a bag. He turned and walked out of the room without waiting for her response, his mind already racing forward to what needed to happen next. He needed to check on Lily. He needed to understand how long this had been going on, and why nobody, including himself, had noticed sooner. As he walked down the hallway, his phone buzzed in his pocket again. He glanced at the screen, expecting it to be Edmund checking in from downstairs. Instead, it was an unfamiliar number, followed by a short message that made him stop walking entirely. You should have been paying closer attention to your own house, Marchetti. Some doors were left open on purpose. Dante stared at the message for a long moment, his mind spinning through the possibilities. Who would send something like that? And what did it mean that doors had been left open on purpose? He slipped the phone back into his pocket, deciding it was something he would need to look into later, once he knew Lily was safe and calm. Right now, nothing mattered more than getting downstairs to his daughter. He found her in the kitchen, sitting on a tall stool at the counter, wrapped in a soft blanket Margaret had draped around her shoulders. A cup of warm milk sat in front of her, untouched. Her eyes were still red, but she had stopped crying, and when she saw her father walk in, something in her small shoulders relaxed just slightly. "Hey, sweetheart," Dante said gently, walking over and sitting on the stool beside her. "How are you feeling?" Lily did not answer right away. She wrapped both hands around the warm cup instead, staring down into it as if the answer might be floating somewhere inside. "Is she gone?" Lily finally whispered. The question, so quiet and so full of hope, made Dante's chest ache. "She's leaving tonight," Dante said. "You don't have to worry about her anymore." Lily looked up at him then, and for the first time since he had walked into the house, he saw something other than fear in her eyes. Relief. Pure, simple relief. The kind that no 6-year-old should have to feel about being safe in their own home. "Daddy," she said softly, "can I tell you something? I didn't want to tell you before because she said you would be angry with me." Dante felt his heart drop into his stomach. He kept his voice as calm and steady as he could manage, even though everything inside him was screaming with worry. "You can tell me anything, Lily, anything at all. I promise I will never be angry at you." Margaret quietly stepped back from the kitchen, giving them space, but stayed close enough to hear, wiping down a counter that did not need wiping, her eyes glistening with unshed tears as she listened. Lily took a deep breath, the kind of breath a small child takes when they are about to say something they have been holding inside for far too long. "This isn't the first time," she whispered. "It happens a lot when you're not home." Outside the kitchen window, the afternoon sun was beginning to sink lower in the sky, casting long shadows across the lawn. Somewhere upstairs, Vivienne was packing her things, unaware of exactly how much her stepdaughter was about to reveal. And somewhere else in the city, whoever had sent that mysterious message was waiting, watching, wondering if Dante Marchetti had understood the warning at all. Dante reached out and gently took his daughter's small hand in his own, giving it a soft squeeze. "Tell me everything," he said, "from the very beginning. I'm listening, and I'm not going anywhere." And for the first time in months, Lily began to talk. Lily spoke slowly at first, her small voice barely above a whisper, but as she continued, the words came faster, as if a door inside her had finally been unlocked after being sealed shut for too long. She told her father about the days when he traveled for business, days that used to feel normal and safe, but had slowly become something she dreaded. She told him about the times Vivienne would tell her she was not wanted in this family, that her mother would still be alive if she had never been born, cruel words spoken quietly enough that no one else in the house would hear them. She told him about being sent to her room without dinner for small mistakes, about toys being taken away and never returned, about being told that if she ever complained to her father, terrible things would happen, and he would stop loving her completely. Dante listened to every word without interrupting, though it took every ounce of self-control he had not to react, not to let his anger show on his face and frighten his daughter into silence again. He simply held her hand and nodded, letting her know through his calm presence that she was safe, that she could keep talking for as long as she needed. When she finally finished, the kitchen was silent except for the soft hum of the refrigerator and the distant sound of birds outside the window. Margaret had stopped pretending to clean and was openly crying now, one hand pressed against her mouth. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" Dante asked gently, though he already knew the answer before Lily even spoke it. "She said you would send me away too," Lily whispered. "She said nobody wants a little girl who causes so much trouble." Dante pulled his daughter into a tight hug, holding her as if he could somehow undo every cruel word that had ever been said to her simply by holding her close enough. "That will never happen," he said firmly. "Not now, not ever. You are the most important person in my entire world, Lily. Nothing and no one will ever change that. I am so sorry I wasn't paying closer attention. I promise you that is going to change starting today." Later that evening, after Lily had finally fallen asleep in her own bed, exhausted from crying and talking and finally being heard, Dante sat alone in his study with Edmund, going over everything that had happened. The strange text message still sat on his phone screen, unanswered, its meaning still unclear. "Someone knew," Dante said, showing Edmund the message. "Someone knew what was happening in my house, and instead of warning me directly, they sent this instead." Edmund read the message twice, his expression growing more serious with each word. "This isn't just about Vivienne being unkind to your daughter, Dante. This sounds like someone wanted you distracted. Someone wanted your attention pulled away from something else." "Away from what?" Edmund was quiet for a moment, thinking. "I don't know yet, but we should find out who Vivienne really is and where she came from, and who might have wanted her in this house in the first place." Dante leaned back in his chair, rubbing his tired eyes. It had been the longest day of his life, and something told him it was only the beginning of something much larger than a difficult marriage or a cruel stepmother. Somewhere out there, someone had known exactly what was happening inside his home, and had chosen silence and secrecy instead of simply warning him. He thought about his daughter sleeping peacefully upstairs for the first time in months, finally safe. He thought about the promise he had made to Grace all those years ago in that hospital room, and he made a new promise to himself, one just as important as the first. He would find out exactly what had been happening in his own home, no matter what it took, no matter who was involved, and no matter how dangerous the answers turned out to be. The next morning, Vivienne was gone before Lily woke up. Her closet stood empty, her side of the bedroom stripped of every trace that she had ever lived there, as if Dante had erased her existence overnight simply by refusing to let her stay another hour under his roof. He had given her enough money to start somewhere else and made it clear, in the calmest and most final voice he could manage, that she was never to come near his daughter again. Vivienne had not argued. She had simply looked at him with an expression that was difficult to read, somewhere between anger and something that almost looked like relief, and walked out the front door without looking back. Dante had expected to feel a wave of relief once she was gone, and part of him did. But another part of him, the part that had spent years reading people and situations for a living, could not shake the feeling that something about the entire situation did not add up. Vivienne had never wanted children. She had said so herself, more than once, before they were even married. So why had she agreed to marry a man with a young daughter in the first place, knowing that motherhood, even a stepmother's version of it, was something she clearly did not want? He brought the question to Edmund later that morning, sitting in his study with a cup of coffee slowly going cold in front of him. "I need you to find out everything about her," Dante said. "Where she really came from, who introduced us. I want to know if there's more to this than a woman who simply didn't want to raise someone else's daughter." Edmund nodded, already pulling out his laptop. "I have people who can dig into this quietly. Give me a day, maybe two." It did not take 2 days. By that evening, Edmund returned to the study with a folder in his hand and an expression that told Dante he was not going to like what was inside it. "Her name isn't originally Vivienne Hall," Edmund said, placing the folder on the desk. "That's a name she started using about 4 years ago. Before that, she went by a different name entirely, and she has family connections to the Callaway organization." Dante felt his entire body go still. The Callaway organization was a rival family, one that had been quietly trying to expand into territory that belonged to the Marchettis for the past 2 years. There had been tension, careful negotiations, and more than a few close calls, but nothing that had ever turned into open conflict. Until now, apparently, someone from that family had been living inside his own home for over a year. "She was placed here," Dante said slowly, understanding dawning on him with a cold, sick feeling in his stomach. "This whole marriage, it wasn't real. It was a way to get someone inside my house." "It looks that way," Edmund confirmed. "I think the plan was patience. Get close to you, gain your trust, learn everything about your operations from the inside, and wait for the right moment to use that information." But why target Lily? If the goal was information, why be cruel to a child who has nothing to do with any of this? Edmund hesitated before answering. "My guess is that she never planned on staying long-term with a child in the house. Raising someone else's daughter probably felt like an unwanted burden that got in the way of whatever her real assignment was. She likely saw Lily as an obstacle rather than a person." Dante stood up from his desk and walked to the window, staring out at the quiet, peaceful lawn where Lily sometimes played on warmer days. The thought that his daughter had been treated so cruelly, not out of simple personal dislike, but as collateral damage in someone else's calculated plan, made something cold and dangerous settle into his chest. "I want everything," Dante said, his voice quiet but absolutely certain. "Every name connected to this, every person who knew about this plan. I want to understand exactly how deep this goes before I decide what happens next." Over the following days, Dante threw himself into learning everything he could, working alongside Edmund late into the night, piecing together a picture that grew more troubling with every new detail. Vivienne, whose real name turned out to be Colleen Ashford, had indeed been connected to the Callaway family through a cousin who held a significant position within their organization. She had been carefully introduced into Dante's social circle over a year before they had even met, every encounter engineered to look accidental, every conversation designed to eventually lead to exactly where it had led. It was a patient, calculated plan, the kind that took real resources and real commitment to carry out. and it confirmed something Dante had feared from the very beginning. The Calloway family was not simply trying to expand quietly anymore. They were preparing for something bigger, something that required detailed knowledge of how the Marchetti organization operated from the inside. Meanwhile, life at home slowly began to change for the better. Dante made a decision that surprised even himself. He began stepping back from certain parts of his business, delegating more responsibility to trusted people like Edmund, and making sure he was home more often, present for dinner, present for bedtime stories, present in all the small moments he had been missing without even realizing it. Lily noticed the change immediately. She began to smile more, to laugh at silly jokes, to run through the house with an easy freedom that had been missing for months. Margaret noticed it too, often catching Dante's eye across the kitchen with a warm, approving smile whenever she saw father and daughter together, sharing breakfast or working on a puzzle at the kitchen table. But even as things improved at home, Dante could not fully relax. The knowledge that someone had successfully placed a person inside his household for over a year, someone skilled enough to fool him completely, weighed heavily on his mind. If the Calloways had managed this once, what else might they be planning? And how many other trusted people around him might not be exactly who they claimed to be? One evening, about 2 weeks after Vivienne's departure, Dante received another message from the same unknown number that had contacted him the day everything had come to light. "You're asking the right questions now, Marchetti, but you're still not asking them fast enough. The next move has already been planned. Watch your closest circle carefully." Dante stared at the message for a long time before showing it to Edmund. Whoever this person was, they clearly knew things that Dante did not, and they seemed to want him to uncover the truth, piece by piece, rather than simply telling him everything outright. It was strange, almost like being guided by someone who wanted to help but could not afford to be seen helping directly. "We need to find out who's sending these," Edmund said, frustration clear in his voice. "This is either someone testing us or someone genuinely trying to warn us. Either way, we can't keep operating blind." Dante agreed completely, but even as they worked to trace the messages, another thought kept pulling at his mind, one that felt more urgent than tracking down a mysterious informant. If the Calloway family had gone to such lengths to place someone inside his home, targeting his personal life through his daughter, then Lily's safety was still very much at risk, whether Vivienne was gone or not. He needed to strengthen security around his daughter immediately, and he needed to figure out exactly what the Calloways were planning next, before they had the chance to make their move. Dante called a meeting the very next morning, gathering his most trusted people around the same long table where everything had started 2 weeks earlier. This time, there was no business deal to discuss, no numbers or routes or names of people who owed favors. This time, the only topic on the table was his daughter's safety. "I want a full security review," Dante said, looking around at the faces of men and women he had trusted for years, wondering now, uncomfortably, if he could truly trust every single one of them completely. "Everyone who has access to my home, my daughter's school, her schedule, I want their backgrounds checked again, thoroughly, starting from today." A woman named Charlotte, who had recently taken over as the head of his personal security team, nodded firmly. She was sharp, careful, and had come highly recommended, though after the situation with Vivienne, Dante found himself questioning even his most trusted recommendations. "I'll start immediately," Charlotte said, "and I'd like to suggest something else, a new arrangement for Lily's daily routine. Different route to school each day. No set pattern. Someone with her at all times who isn't just a driver but trained to notice anything unusual." "Do it," Dante said without hesitation. "Whatever it takes." As the meeting continued, Edmund raised the subject of the mysterious messages once again. They had managed to trace the number to a prepaid phone, purchased with cash, impossible to connect directly to any specific person. Whoever was sending them clearly knew how to stay hidden. "There's something else," Edmund added, sliding a piece of paper across the table. "I did some digging into recent movements within the Callaway organization. Their activity has increased significantly over the past month, especially around the docks and the warehouse district. It could be nothing. But given everything else we've learned, I don't think we should assume that." Dante studied the paper carefully. The warehouse district had always been a sensitive area, home to several of his own operations, and increased activity from a rival family in that specific location was not something he could afford to ignore. "Set up surveillance," Dante said, quietly. "I want to know exactly what they're doing down there before we decide on anything." The meeting continued for another hour, covering every possible angle, every precaution that needed to be taken. By the time it ended, Dante felt slightly more at ease, knowing that concrete steps were finally being taken to protect his daughter and understand the full scope of what the Callaway family had planned. That evening, he picked Lily up from school himself, something he had not done in longer than he cared to admit. She climbed into the car with a wide, surprised smile on her face. "You came to get me," she said happily, settling into her seat. "Of course I did," Dante said, smiling back at her, feeling a warmth in his chest that had nothing to do with business or danger or rival families. "I'm always going to try to be here for the important moments now." They drove home together, Lily chattering happily about her day at school, about a drawing she had made, about a friend who had shared her lunch with her. Dante listened to every word, holding onto the simple normalcy of the moment, knowing that beneath the surface of their peaceful life, something much larger and more dangerous was quietly unfolding. Over the following days, the surveillance on the warehouse district began to reveal troubling patterns. Trucks arriving late at night, unloading crates that were quickly moved indoors before anyone could get a clear look at their contents. Unfamiliar faces moving through the area, careful and deliberate, clearly following some kind of organized plan. Charlotte's security review, meanwhile, turned up something unexpected. One of the newer members of the household staff, a young man named Gregory who had been hired only 4 months earlier to help with maintenance around the property, had a background that did not entirely check out. His previous employment history contained gaps that could not be explained, and further digging revealed a distant connection to someone within the Callaway organization. Dante felt the cold weight of realization settle over him once again. It was happening a second time, someone else placed carefully inside his life, inside his home, watching and waiting. "I want him watched," Dante told Charlotte, keeping his voice calm despite the anger building beneath the surface. "Don't confront him yet. I want to understand what he's actually doing here, what information he might already have passed along." For 3 days, Gregory was watched carefully, his movements tracked, his conversations noted whenever possible. It became clear fairly quickly that he was not simply gathering general information. He was specifically interested in the household's daily schedule, particularly Lily's routine, the times she came and went, the paths she took, the people who accompanied her. The realization hit Dante hard. This was not just about business information or territorial expansion. The Callaway family's interest in his daughter was not incidental collateral damage from a larger scheme, as he had originally believed. It was deliberate. Someone wanted to know exactly where, and when Lily would be vulnerable. He confronted Gregory directly that evening, in a private room away from the rest of the household, with Edmund and Charlotte present as witnesses. Gregory, faced with the evidence that had been gathered against him, eventually admitted the truth, though it took considerable pressure and the clear understanding that continued silence would not benefit him in any way. He had indeed been placed by the Callaway family, tasked specifically with learning Lily's schedule and reporting it back through a contact he had never actually met in person, communicating only through anonymous messages, much like the ones Dante himself had been receiving. "What are they planning?" Dante demanded. "Why does a rival organization care so much about a 6-year-old child's schedule?" Gregory hesitated, clearly frightened, before finally answering. "I don't know the full plan. I was only told to gather information, but I heard enough to understand that they're not interested in hurting her directly. They want leverage, a way to force you into giving up territory without an open conflict. They know you'd do anything to keep her safe." The words settled over the room like a heavy, suffocating weight. Dante had spent weeks worrying about cruelty within his own home, about a stepmother's unkindness toward his daughter. He had not fully considered that the danger might extend so much further, that his daughter's safety was being calculated and weighed as a strategic advantage by people who saw her not as a child, but as a tool to be used against him. He thought about the message on his phone. Some doors were left open on purpose. Now, finally, the meaning behind those words was becoming clear. Someone somewhere had known about this entire plan and had been trying to warn him all along, carefully, anonymously, perhaps because they themselves were caught somewhere inside an organization they no longer fully believed in. Later that night, after Gregory had been dealt with and removed from the household permanently, Dante sat in Lily's room and watched his daughter sleep peacefully, unaware of everything happening around her. He thought about how close he had come to losing everything, not just to cruelty within his own walls, but to a much larger and more calculated threat that had been building quietly for over a year. He made a decision then, sitting in the soft glow of her nightlight, watching her chest rise and fall with each peaceful breath. He was not simply going to defend against whatever the Calloway family was planning. He was going to end the threat completely, permanently, in a way that would ensure his daughter never had to live in fear again. But he would not do it with violence. He had learned enough over the years to know that violence only invited more violence, an endless cycle that never truly protected anyone in the long run. He needed a different approach, something smarter, something that would remove the threat without putting his daughter or anyone else in greater danger. He picked up his phone and sent a message to Edmund. "Set up a meeting with Oliver Calloway. Tell him I want to talk face to face before this goes any further for either of us." It was a risky move, reaching out directly to the head of a rival family. But Dante had spent his whole life learning that the smartest moves were rarely the safest-looking ones on the surface. Sometimes, the only way to protect what mattered most was to walk directly into the danger and face it head-on, on your own terms, rather than waiting for it to arrive uninvited. The meeting was arranged for 3 days later, at a neutral location both families had used before during rare moments of careful diplomacy, a quiet restaurant on the edge of the city that closed its doors to the public whenever such delicate conversations needed to take place. Dante arrived early, accompanied only by Edmund, both of them dressed formally, both of them fully aware that this single conversation could either prevent a dangerous conflict or ignite one. Oliver Calloway arrived exactly on time, walking in with the calm confidence of a man who believed he already held the advantage. He was older than Dante by perhaps 10 years, with sharp eyes and a carefully controlled expression that gave away nothing. "Dante," Oliver said, taking a seat across the table, "I have to admit, I'm curious why you reached out directly instead of sending one of your people." "Because I wanted you to understand something clearly without any confusion," Dante said, keeping his voice steady and calm. "I know what your family has been doing, placing people inside my home, gathering information about my daughter's schedule. I know all of it." Something flickered across Oliver's face, brief but noticeable, a small crack in his otherwise composed expression. "That's a serious accusation," Oliver said carefully. "It's not an accusation. It's a fact, and I have all the evidence to prove it, evidence that I could easily share with several people who would be very interested to learn that the Calloway family has been targeting children as leverage in a business dispute." Dante leaned forward slightly. I didn't come here to threaten you, Oliver. I came here to offer you a choice. Oliver studied him carefully, clearly recalculating his approach now that his family's plan had been fully exposed. What kind of choice? You end this now. Completely. No more surveillance, no more people placed inside my home, no more interest whatsoever in my daughter or anything connected to her. In exchange, I won't share what I know with anyone, and we find a way to settle our territorial disagreements through proper negotiation, the way it should have been handled from the very beginning, instead of this. For a long moment, Oliver said nothing, weighing his options carefully. Finally, he spoke. And if I refuse? Then everyone will know exactly what kind of family targets a 6-year-old girl to gain a business advantage, Dante said simply. And you'll find that very few people, even among your own allies, will want to be associated with that kind of reputation. Some things cross a line that even people in our world don't cross, Oliver. You know that as well as I do. Oliver's jaw tightened, and for the first time since he had sat down, something like genuine discomfort crossed his features. Whatever plan had been set into motion, it seemed increasingly clear that not everyone involved had been entirely comfortable with the direction it had taken. I wasn't fully aware of every detail, Oliver admitted quietly. Some decisions were made by people beneath me, choices I didn't approve directly. Then perhaps it's time you paid closer attention to your own house too, Dante said, echoing without realizing it the very words from that first mysterious message he had received weeks earlier. The conversation continued for another hour, careful and measured, both men navigating the delicate balance between strength and compromise. By the end of it, an agreement had been reached, one that would be finalized formally over the following weeks through proper channels, but the core of it was clear. The Calloway family would withdraw entirely from any involvement with Dante's household, and the territorial disputes that had started this entire chain of events would be settled through negotiation rather than schemes and hidden threats. As they were leaving the restaurant, Dante's phone buzzed one final time. He glanced at the screen, and for a moment his heart caught in his chest. It was the same unknown number that had been messaging him throughout this entire ordeal. You did well, Marchetti, better than most would have. Take care of that little girl. She deserves a peaceful life. This is the last message you'll receive from this number. Dante stared at the message for a long moment, wondering who had been watching, who had cared enough to send careful warnings without ever revealing themselves. He would likely never know for certain, but he found himself grateful nonetheless, for whatever small act of conscience had led someone to help him protect his daughter, even from within an organization that had been working against him. Life slowly began to settle into something calmer, something more peaceful, in the weeks and months that followed. Dante kept his promise to himself, remaining more present at home, attending school events, sharing dinners, being there for the small, ordinary moments that mattered more than any business deal ever could. Lily flourished in the safety and stability that followed. The fear that had once made her flinch at the sound of a door opening slowly faded, replaced by the easy laughter and confidence of a child who finally felt completely safe in her own home. She made new friends at school, took up painting as a hobby, and often filled the house with the sound of her cheerful chatter, a sound Dante had once feared he might never fully hear again. Margaret remained a steady, loving presence in their lives, and Charlotte's careful attention to security ensured that both Dante and Lily could move through their days without the constant undercurrent of worry that had once shadowed everything they did. Years passed, and Lily grew from a frightened little girl into a confident young woman, thriving in ways that made Dante's heart swell with pride every single day. She excelled in school, developed a passion for painting that eventually led to gallery showings praised by people who had no idea of the difficult beginnings she had overcome. She grew into someone kind and strong, someone who carried none of the fear that had once defined her childhood, only the security of knowing, without any doubt, that she was loved completely and protected fiercely. One evening, many years later, Dante sat on the back porch of the same estate, watching Lily, now grown, laughing with friends in the garden below, her painting supplies scattered across a table nearby, colors bright and full of life against the canvas she had been working on all afternoon. Edmund joined him quietly, taking a seat beside him, following his gaze toward the garden. "She turned out beautifully," Edmund said, "considering everything that happened." Dante nodded slowly, a small, contented smile crossing his face. "Every single day, I think about how close I came to losing something that mattered more than anything else in my entire world. All the power, all the wealth, none of it would have meant anything if I had lost her." "You didn't lose her," Edmund said. "You fought for her, that's what matters." Dante watched his daughter a moment longer, her laughter carrying softly on the evening breeze, her happiness so complete and so hard-won that it filled something inside him that no business success ever could. "No empire is worth what I almost lost," Dante said quietly, more to himself than to Edmund. "I understood that the day I got that phone call. I understand it even more now." Below them, Lily looked up toward the porch, caught her father's eye, and waved happily before returning to her painting, completely secure in a life that had once nearly been destroyed by cruelty and hidden danger, but had instead become something full of warmth, safety, and love. And as the sun set slowly over the quiet garden, casting soft golden light across the entire estate, Dante Marchetti finally allowed himself to feel something he had chased for years without fully realizing it. Peace. Real, lasting peace, built not on power or fear, but on the simple, unshakable bond between a father and the daughter he had promised, so many years ago, to protect no matter what.